All right, guys. I think we're back. I think most people are back. They'll trickle in if not. But again, want to welcome you all. It's going to be another great morning. It already has been. We're going to keep doing this get to know you stuff. It's not always going to be in the morning, so we are going to sometimes get going right at 10. So try to be here on time as best you can. And but yeah, so we're going to keep trying to get to know each other. I want to encourage you guys to get to know each other. I want to actually encourage you guys. I'm going to talk about this at the end too, to try to get together with some of these people that you don't know very well, or the people you do know well, but especially those you don't know well, during the weekday. Okay, just try to keep building these relationships, this family dynamic here. Also, I already know there's quite a few people who couldn't make it this weekend, traveling, all sorts of things. And so we always have this camera back here. And so some of you may have even watched last week on the camera. We'd love to have you here because you get to know each other, but I just know you can't sometimes. So we will have that. And what's important to know about that video is we're not going for Hollywood production level. It's purely content, okay? It will be hopefully good, good volume so you can hear things well. But my intentions, more so than quality, is that you guys are able to hear what's happening here. And then on top of that, so if you're driving or something, you can just let it run. But that's going to be at our website, which is Engage, SWMI, EngageSouthwestMichigan.com. Some people have said, hey, did you name the church and not tell us? I'm like, no, I didn't do that. This is kind of a landing spot for the church plant, right? And so if this is what it does. First and foremost, it gives us a spot because we hope to continue to plant churches out of this church, right? So this gives us a spot to be able to continue to talk about church planting independent of this next church. The other thing it does is gives us time to figure out a good church name, because once we pick one, we're kind of stuck with it. So we don't want to pick a bad one. And so it takes the pressure off deciding in the next week or month, trying to come up with a name with a lot of pressure. Honestly, as long as we have a name by like midsummer, something like that, we'll be in good shape for marketing to push through the fall. But Engage SWMI is the website. You guys should have had an email. We're still kind of building and tweaking, so if you look at it and be like, wow, this is terrible, well, you can build it. No, I'm just kidding. We're working on it, and the important stuff in there is going to have links to the videos. That's housed on a YouTube channel right now. It's going to have some information about us. It's going to have tabs for giving, that sort of thing. But this will also help when you guys get ready to go ask other people for money for our church. You can direct them to this as well, and that will help for them to be able to give through that means. So that's kind of a little bit about the Engage. I want to take a second to talk about these sticky notes, right? You guys did this last week. See that little parking lot thing? If you weren't here, if you have questions, thoughts, anything like that come up, there's Post-it notes, sticky notes in your little boxes in there, your tubs. Write those down, stick them in there. We want to get to them. If it's a super pressing question, especially about something I'm talking about, just raise your hand and stop me or speak up. But if it's something just kind of in your mind that you don't want to forget, write it down. You can stick them up there. We're going to try to get to them. So there's some that I'm going to have private conversation, personal conversations to learn more, but I want to mention a couple that came up. And one of them was, are we going to have outreach ministries, right? And so we've talked about these big crowds. So if you haven't been to the vision meeting, watch that vision video on the YouTube channel that talks more about this. But those big crowds will be our serving outlet. So as those become more concrete and more developed, they will be the people that go out and say, hey, we really want to adopt this ministry or these people or serve in this way for this day or this season. And that's how we're going to do it. But we don't have those established yet, and we are going to start serving right away. So if you have some cool ideas, the ways you want to serve, engage in that, start brainstorming those. And we're going to actually have some time later today to do some of that brainstorming. But we are going to do that. So I want to encourage you, be thinking about those service opportunities, but also be thinking about those other side, the kind of the social ones, because those are both places where we hope to connect with people outside of the church and have an impact, build a relationship with them. So another one in here said this: if we have a group event to invite people to, how should we do that? So this goes into those communication pieces. So if you're having a group event, we're going to do some brainstorming and plan that. What I'd really want to encourage you guys to do is if you're going to use social media like Facebook or something, build it on your own page, on your own, and then share it into whatever spaces you want. So our launch team, Kenzie and I are going to develop, we haven't done it yet, but we're going to develop more of a social page for Southwest Michigan that's not tied to our church at all. It's just meant to get people in, hey, what's going on this weekend, what's going on this week, and we'll be able to dump some of those things in there. So that's not built yet. So for now, just build an event on your Facebook page, share it to the Portage Launch Team Facebook group, or you can email me and I can communicate it out. You have these contact info. If you haven't got that, they're up here, 3 pages. You can email everybody yourself if you want, or just email the people that you want to invite. If you need to keep it small for any reason, that's okay. Because what we probably don't want to do is have 50 people from our church plant and 2 people from outside of the church. That feels scary. So if you know there's only a few of your friends that are going to come, maybe you can just invite a handful of people from here. That's okay. It really is. So we hope to have a bunch of these things happening simultaneously. And the other side of this is just how do we do it practically? How do we get people to want to come to our things? And what I want to caution you is don't make it sound too scary, too weird and churchy, right? All my church is having this thing, you should come. Right away, a lot of people are going to be like, oh, yeah, I'll just let me know, I'll be there, and they'll never come. You have to be honest, you have to have integrity, but realize that people get scared about that stuff. And so be able to say, hey, we're having a few of our friends over. We're still friends here. Yeah.
Think about the inclusive aspect of it. If we want them to feel included, it can't be just a group and them. So you guys know if someone said, well, everybody from my work is coming and I want you to come too. That already is tough for us who might feel a little more comfortable walking into a strange situation. So think about it in the sense of we don't want to lie, we don't want to mislead someone, but just like when we were at Hopcat and some of my coworkers were asking, well, are all these people from your church? And literally not everyone was. So I was like, well, some of them are, and then some of them I just met, which included some of you. And, some of them are from here and some of them are from there. So it's how you are acting about it that's going to make them feel included or not. So just thinking through, just have it ready in your back pocket. It's not just church people.
Right.
Because that doesn't, I don't want that to define me. So,
Yeah, so it could, especially if there's some of your friends, if some of these people happen to be people you will work with, or some of these people happen to be ones that live near you, they're your neighbors too. Just be aware that it's hard for people to step into any, like she's saying, any exclusive circle, like a work circle or a church circle or anything, and be aware that when you invite people in. But the key is that you are inviting people in and making sure that they're excited. Mallory and Chris don't know, but we've been inviting people like crazy into their house, and we're like, hey, they gave us permission to do that, and, who is it? And said, somebody that you actually know, but we're like, Mallory, Underlindy, yeah, I know them. Yeah, they're having some friends over. We were invited. They said we could invite people over. That's all it is, and it feels just a little bit safer that way. And so, welcome. Come on in. And so that's the heart of this. But don't be afraid to invite people into this. We're hosting these types of things to create spaces for people to join us. That's the whole point of it. And we're doing things that we think they're going to want to do as well. So, does that all make sense? All right, there's a few more in here, and I'm going to talk to you personally about those, so just know that we will follow up with all of these and keep going. So, hi, my name's Mitch. I'm the pastor here. Welcome. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but welcome. So, one of the things, too, that I want to do is just give you guys some space to ask questions. So I want to do that now. Do any of you, we have a microphone floating around here. The reason we pass this around is so you can hear it in the camera. Well, I watched this last one, and when Kenzie talked last week, you couldn't hear what she said. So if you have a question, we're going to hand that to you just to ask. So anybody have questions to me, where we're at, that sort of thing?
Who wants to break the ice? We all know. Yeah, I was going to say, we all know we have questions.
I'm just curious if you've had any leads on like a building or
Yes,
location.
good question. Yes, so we actually, that's a good reminder because I was going to say that and I forgot to say that. So, location, this is where we're at. We've looked at quite a few places. I mean, everything extreme from the Wayside up at Stadium to some like a school, the Country Day School over by, I mean, we've looked at a lot of places. And nothing is really jumping out at us at this point because there are some certain restrictions that we have to realize. We're able to be small, at least initially, but it can't be too small for our space. We hope to have at least 250 people at our first service, so it needs to be pretty good size. And the other side of it is we want to have a really quality space for kids. And so to have a quality space for kids, it almost needs a separate, soundproof
Secure.
space. Yeah, where they can get, so it's not super distracting for them. And so those types of buildings are hard to find. We actually looked at one last week. It's a big building across from Lake Center Elementary, 10,000 square feet. It's a steel building structure. The front 2,500 square feet was like 8 smaller offices, and the back half was all open warehouse with the big overhead doors. It actually, that type of space would be pretty good. 10,000 square feet would be pretty good, and it has that. The problem with that is it's not for sale, it's for lease, and the lease is $5,000 a month, which is pretty expensive, and you would still have to do build out. Like AC, they said, just put into the open area would be about $30,000. And on a lease, you don't get that money back.
And the
you just
fire
say,
suppression.
thanks for letting us use your place, keep all the stuff we put into it at the end. So if we're going to dump that kind of money into something, it probably makes more sense to save our money and buy something and do it. We don't have that kind of money right now. The Bridge is willing to partner just like they did with Phillips Church and help with a mortgage if we need to. But so we haven't stopped looking for a place to purchase. That's still an option. But a lot of, things are expensive. And so that's, to give you perspective, Phillips Church had a free building and they still spent about $400,000 just doing renovations. So if you don't get a free building and then you anticipate another $300,000-$400,000 of renovations, that's pretty hefty. So we are looking. We will continue to look. In the meantime, our best option, I believe, is to rent a space. Not lease it, but rent it. Because when you lease, obviously it's expensive, but also you're paying utilities, you're paying taxes, which is pretty... Did you guys know churches don't pay tax? And so if you lease a building, though, it is a business, so you would pay taxes on that. So that building we looked at would be about $20,000 in taxes a year. So we're just literally throwing it at the government if we do a lease like that. So these are some of the things we're thinking about. And we say we better just rent unless something happens, somebody throws us a free building, something like that, or even if somebody says, I own this building, we'll lease it to you for free. Just pay utilities and taxes. That would be a good deal. I think that'd be all right. But in the meantime, we're saying it probably makes most sense to rent a space, whatever they charge us monthly, maybe $1,000 a month or something like that. We get the space for 1 or maybe 2 days a week. And we're looking specifically right now at other churches for these 2 reasons. One is that we wouldn't have to do a ton of setup and tear down, which is nice, and even from an AV perspective, a lot of that's already there. We might need to supplement it. But second is they have space already set up for kids, which is really important. It's harder to do that, but it is possible in a school setting, so that's not off the table either, or a more even theater setting, that's not off the table. But you have to realize that setting up that room space for kids is a little bit harder to do in those situations. Not impossible, a lot of people do it. And then the other side of that is if you do like not an auditorium, but a gym at a school, you're doing chair setup and tear down, stage setup and tear down week in and week out. So you have to factor all that in. And I've said this, and so if you're new, you haven't heard this, but I keep saying this. If I had to ask you to spend 3 or 4 hours doing something each week, I would rather have you out doing life with somebody who doesn't know Jesus than setting up chairs. That's just where I'm at. That's how I would rather see you use your time. There are upsides, so if we need to do it, that's a great spot to invite somebody into to help, right? Wherever they're at, people love to help and set up chairs as long as it's not for an eternity. There's a church in our group, in this class that's in the RCA, that did it for 10 years in Plainwell. Some of you guys may know it, North Point. And the pastor there told me, he's like, don't do it. Don't do it. Like, it just gets tiring to do that each week. And so that's kind of our options we're looking at. And we're hoping that there's a couple churches, Reformed churches we're talking to. So I've talked to Lakeland Reformed. So it's between Vicksburg and Portage on Sprinkle Road. I've talked to First Reformed right there on Center, near Central High School and all that. And they haven't responded back, but I've contacted Lord of Life, LOL Lutheran Church on South Portage Road, kind of by the Cove restaurant, a little bit past it, just to say, would you be interested in renting that space? We're looking at Sunday evening services for a lot of reasons. It just happens to work out that most churches aren't meeting on Sunday night, so that space would be available as well. And in a best case scenario, a church would love to partner with us and charge us little or no rent, which would be pretty cool too. So that's kind of where we're at with the building. I want to empower you guys to be looking around, be talking to people, be asking people about their ideas. And actually, don't be afraid to tell them what we're doing and say, hey, would you want to donate some space? You know, whether that's just a long-term kind of free lease, or maybe they want to donate property or donate a building. You just never know. This kind of stuff happens all the time. And so as you investigate, find out from people whether they might be willing to do something like that. It certainly doesn't hurt to ask, I'll tell you that.
I guess this kind of goes along with the building, kind of, but what does our budgeting situation look like? So the money that we're starting to give now, is that all, I know we're going to use some of it, obviously, materials and stuff
Right.
as we get going. Is there a certain amount being saved towards building, utilities, stuff like that? Are we
Yep.
looking at giving away, kind of like the bridge does, giving back, doing
Right.
stuff like that? Do we have any of that kind of laid out yet?
Yeah, so I've been working on a preliminary budget with Kim. Where are you at, Kim?
She's behind me.
Where's she at?
Behind
Right here,
me.
Kim. We're so fortunate to have Kim on our team because she runs all the money at this whole bridge operation. So she knows this stuff well. She's done it before with Phillips Church. She's been doing this for a long time. And so we've been working on this. And we are kind of working out a rough budget. It is really hard in the first year because you don't know exactly how much you're going to spend or need. You don't know. We're not even sure if we're buying or renting at this point. But we are working on it. But initially, that is something we're already trying to put in there, is that you can go ahead and speak too.
Yep. What I can say is all of our giving now that comes into our church plant goes into our own separate fund.
Yep.
It'll sit there. It will be used for the expenses that we are incurring now, but that's very minimal, and they are going into a separate. We're setting up our own church plant profit and loss company, so as we start to develop and move forward, then we'll roll out the whole budget and depending on what our needs arise. On that note, if you are giving online currently to the bridge, make sure you go and change it to the church plant. I'm going to try and keep a lookout for everyone as much as possible. But if you could do that and I don't have to look for it and move the money around, then that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, so if if you give electronically to the bridge or you already know what we're talking about. But because the bridge, this is our parent church, they help us a ton. So a lot of things we're not incurring expenses on, like obviously the space, even a coffee. I mean, there's a lot of printing, that sort of thing. That's really, really helpful. And so everything you give goes to the bridge, but it's tagged there online. It'll say, I think the 3 options are the bridge, general fund, raise the roof, and church plant. And you just want to make sure and you select that church plant tab when you do it, so that you don't drive Kim crazy trying to figure out who's supposed to be giving where. But yeah, so that's what that, and that money, like she said, is going in to our own checking account. And on top of that, the Bridge has committed to this first year somewhere at probably $75,000, maybe even more, to the church plant in the first year, which is pretty cool. And in the first year is my salary as well. So we're anticipating or hoping for a surplus this year, and a lot of that surplus would be used for, building expense, purchasing, saving a building. It'd be for tech, because quite frankly, that's really expensive, instruments and some of that tech stuff. But we are anticipating, or I'm already planning on giving money away. So we're setting out right now, kind of our preliminary numbers are 5% to church planting, 5% to domestic missions, and then 5% to global missions right off the top. And then I think we have ear tagged in there right now. That could change, but about 20% we're just saving for building. So that money, we are planning, we are thinking ahead. We will kind of finalize that budget in the upcoming months, but that's kind of how that's working. So.
My question is, can we pray?
Huh? Yeah, for sure.
Well, I just think that's, we aren't doing a regular church service here, but
Right.
I think it just would be cool for us to pray to seek God's grace on them.
So let me ask the question, are you asking to pray right now or pray regularly, weekly?
To pray regularly
Yeah.
at the service.
So I have allotted 15 minutes at the end every week for us to pray.
All right.
And I will really try to stick to that, because prayer always gets kind of shoved off at the end and never happens. Also, some of us meet beforehand and we pray together too. You're more than welcome to come to that. We're going to try to start doing that 9:30 sharp. So please come and pray with us in that too. But yeah, great question. We should be praying. Any other ones? All right, we're going to keep moving. Like I said, if you think of more questions, write in a sticky note at the end or during. Feel free to get up, get food, whatever. This should be comfortable. But go over here to that parking lot thing and go slap them on there. It helps if you put your name, because that way, if I have questions about what do you mean, I'm not quite sure, then I know who to talk to figure out more about what you're thinking. So please do that. All right, a couple of things I want to mention. Who are we inviting to the launch team? Remember this week I said, hey, would you be praying about one person that you could invite in to join us on the launch team? And I had a great conversation with Kim actually this week. She was like, I'm not sure what that means or who we should be inviting. That's a really legitimate question. So I want to clarify on that. Anybody is welcome here, okay? Anybody is welcome here. Quite frankly, if I had my preference, I hope we'd have a good number of people who are not in it or haven't been from a church or completely unchurched or de-churched, whatever, because they bring an important perspective that sometimes when we spend a lot of time in the church, we don't know or we don't see. So they're certainly welcome, but realizing that it might be a hard environment to invite them in, because we're kind of deep diving into what does it mean to follow Jesus, discipleship. So you have to use your own discretion to say, would this be a person, regardless of where they're at in their faith, that would be ready to jump into something like that? And if they are, then definitely invite them in. On the flip side of that, if you're like, these are people that I really hope start walking with Jesus, but I don't think they'd come to this is what our hangouts are for. We want you to be inviting them into that, or just, even if it's not a hangout, invite them into your home and just start getting to know them, walking, doing life with them. And so that's what these two different things are. But we do hope to grow this team. Remember, I said one of our goals is that we have 75 people in this, 75 adults rather, as a part of this team by May. And so we do want to continue to grow this team. I think once we get to May or the end of May, it will be hard for people to jump in on the launch side of things, because we'll be well on our way. But it doesn't mean they couldn't come. And I imagine hopefully by maybe even July, we'll be starting to do preview services, and that would be a great place to invite them into. It would be a preview service at that point. So yeah, with that said, I want to clarify kind of what I mentioned in that email. I hate sending emails. I hate sending those like, hey, that all-in comment, hopefully you read it. It was a really long email. I timed it. It was actually 4 minutes. I'll try to avoid long emails as best I can. But the end, talking about that all-in, I want to clarify what that's all about. I'm not trying to be a tyrant or high control. I want to honor your time. And it's really hard to be committed to this church plant and committed to the bridge. And Jeff would tell you the same thing. If he's here, he would say the same thing. And so that's all that's about, is we just want you to be healthy. And if I had to have you choose between coming on a Saturday night for service or going out with a friend who, like last night, Kenzie and I went out with some friends of hers, and we just had dinner together. I would rather you guys do something like that than come to a worship service, because that's what this season is all about, is connecting with those outside of the church. Same with Sunday mornings. I would rather have you guys go have breakfast with somebody in here or somebody outside of here than come to a service, because that's what this season's all about. If you're going to be giving your time, I'd rather see you giving your time towards the mission of reaching the unchurched. And so that's kind of what I was getting at there. And I know some of you are like, man, I really like the worship and that sort of thing, and I get it. And I don't want you to stop worshiping. I want you to do it on your own, and we are going to have that at more infrequent intervals, but we are going to do that to honor that. If you're a musician, like, man, I got to sing, I got to play, then, Ben over here is already starting a bar band, so, you could maybe get in his bar band and start playing the bar circuit around here and get to know people that way. But yeah, so we want you to be creative about how you use your gifts, but our big focus right now is learning, training, and connecting with people who don't have a church family, right? And they might be people who've just been away from the church for a long time, and they might be people who've never, ever thought about going to church in their life. But either way, we want you connected with those folks. So, last disclaimer here. I've had a couple people mention, like, Mitch, you're talking a lot about discipleship and leadership and this and that. I don't know if I think about myself in that kind of way. And here's the deal. I don't know how many of us actually believe we're qualified to do God's work. That's a normal insecurity, right? That's a normal insecurity that I have, that I get nervous about. And so I wanna recognize that that's real. And this book, wherever it's at, that discipleship culture book, that's why we're using that, because it's a manual. Think of it as a manual to help you get some tools to be able to lead people down that faith journey well. And so, like I said, it's not the end-all be-all, but I like it because it helps you have confidence walking somebody through their faith journey. And so don't be afraid. We're going to go into this, and if you're like, Mitch, I'm really nervous, let's talk. We're gonna figure that out. But my goal would be that everybody, or nearly everybody, as a part of our launch team, in October, after we start our regular worship services, that every one of you would be leading one of these huddles, one of these 2 to 4 person groups. And so I want you to feel ready to do that. But know that you don't have to be perfected. You don't have to have all the tough answers in the church figured out. That's not what this is about. And we'll let you walk through that book to help you do that. So, where are we at in time? I want to stay on here. All right, we got some more time here. So, some of you already read chapter 2 of the Discipling Culture book, the blue book, because apparently I wasn't super clear. I was perfectly clear in my head, I just have to admit. But apparently I wasn't, because I've talked to several already who've read chapter 2 in the Discipling Culture book. And, all right. I always knew I liked Mallory better than Rick anyways. I read both just in case. Yeah, so what I invited you to read was the printed off part in your binder. It was chapter 2 of this book, same author, okay? I have a few of these copies laying around. I didn't have enough to buy everybody. It would be a great book to buy if you want to, but we have several copies that read them, bring them back so somebody else can read them. It's a really good book. But that was the assignment, chapter 2 of this. Chapter 2 of the Discipling Culture book, I'm going to actually hit on today. That was the invitation challenge piece. I kind of flew through it last week, and I realized that was not the way I wanted to do that. So I kind of want to hit reset and start that over. If you read chapter 2 of Discipling Culture, you're going to get an even better explanation than I'm going to give right now. But I want to show you how you would do that in a huddle. This is not a real experience because there's 40 of us, 30 of us in here right now. Normally you'd be doing this in a group of 1, 2, 3 other people. And so it would look a little bit different. So I want to walk through that with you right now. I've done it before in a bit more formal settings with 5 or 6 people where I do use a whiteboard. If you're in a group of 1 or 2 people, you're probably going to be doing it on a piece of paper, something like that. So just recognize that's how this is going to work. But I just kind of want to walk you through how you start this conversation with somebody that you're kind of mentoring using one of these tools in this book. So I'd walk into it, and we would be catching up for a while. We'd be saying, those questions, by the way, they were a version of what this book talks about. What is God saying to you? What are you going to do about it? Every one of these huddles should end with those 2 questions. What is God saying to you? What are you going to do about it? And so we'd be talking about that. How'd it go this week? You had talked about how you felt like God was kind of urging you to do this, so you decided I was going to make this plan and do this week. How'd it go? There's real accountability there. You get in talking about that, and however it bridges, you'll make that work. But you just start talking about, have you ever noticed how people kind of are predisposed to this really like invitational grace orientation, or really this hard driving challenge orientation? So I've got this friend, and you can just ride him and grill him, and you get the best out of him. He's like the perfect subject for the coach who really pushes his athletes, right? There's people out there that the harder you push them, the more production you're going to get on them. They just love it. And that would be a person that's kind of in that challenge orientation. They respond well to a high amount of challenge. But then there's other people over here that have this need to be invited into relationship, to kind of take it slow, to really want to know that you love them before you push them. And that would be these people that are a little bit more invitational oriented. And when you start thinking about it, you probably have a leaning one way or another. So which one would you say you respond better to? Do you respond better to that high challenge, kind of get it, I'll push you, or do you respond better to, hey, let's talk about this, I'll walk through it with you? And you'd get them to answer that question. And you'd want to say, hey, this is real. Like everybody kind of does this. Me personally, I don't respond well to that really hard pressure pushing. You do that to me, and I'm just like, screw you, I don't even know you. What are you talking about? Like, I'll do it when I want to do it, right? That's how I am. And so if I know I'm like that, then I need somebody that pushes me in a bit more of an invitational way. It's in the context of a relationship. But if I know, hey, my buddy over here, he really needs a hard push. He's struggling with this thing. But if I play too soft with him, he's just going to keep doing it. So I have to kind of ride him a little bit. Say, hey, dude, you're screwing up. I'm going to push you, and he's going to respond well. And so we see in this is this principle. Oh, that's not going to work. Of invitation and challenge, and we see it exhibited even in the life of Jesus. And this is where we get the model. He was an expert at running this balance and figuring out what people need and when. And we see it in Matthew 16. He's talking to Peter, and this is the moment that one of his disciples, Peter, it was the first time he professed that Jesus was the Son of God. And Jesus was obviously excited and invited him in this deep relational connection and empowering him and said, you know what, you're going to build the church. You're going to lead the church, which is really awesome. You see this high invitation in this moment that Jesus gives to Peter. And I kid you not, it's like 5, maybe 8 verses later, Peter is getting upset with Jesus. It's a different storyline, but it's literally like 8, 10 verses later. Peter's getting upset with Jesus because he keeps predicting how he's going to die. And Peter rightfully is like getting frustrated by this. Like, why are you talking like this? Stop saying this. And what does Jesus say? He says, get behind me, Satan. And he says, being a follower of Jesus is choosing to deny yourself. And he gives this super high challenge deal. And we see this happen all the time when Jesus is working with people. You think about the woman at the well in John 4, right? There's this woman there, Jesus is there, and he says, hey, come and get water with me. And this is a Samaritan woman who we find out later is kind of caught in a web of sin, right? And Jesus invites her in, and she says, you shouldn't be talking to me. You see this high invitation in here, but then he kind of calls out her sin, right? Like, no, you've not been married to one man, you've been married to 5 men, right? Like calls out the sin in her life and pushes her towards obedience and following Jesus, this high challenge. But you see this go back and forth. And this is ultimately the call for us as disciples to constantly not only realize what we need in our life, but how are we going to challenge people well in their faith? Because if we're always riding this high invitation over here, we're never going to push them into actual growth. If we're always pushing them hard into challenge, they're just going to get frustrated and burned out. And that's what these quadrants are that we talked about. Remember, here was the cozy culture. This was the discipling culture. I'm trying to remember all these now. This one is I think it was bored. And then this one was frustrated. And that corresponds with these quadrants. If you have a lot of challenge and low invitation, you just get burned out and frustrated. If you have neither, you're just bored. Up here, a lot of invitation, you're super cozy, but not getting pushed. Here is where we want to be. So how do we get here? How do we ourselves get here? Knowing, hey, if I've been living up here in this cozy culture a little while, I think it's time that I push. I think it's time that I get somebody that pushes me a little bit. If you're feeling really over here and burned out, you've just been getting pressed a lot in your faith, and you don't feel like you've had a lot of support, you need to realize, man, I need somebody in my life right now that can speak life and love into me and encourage me. Because here's the thing is typically the way somebody comes into faith, they have to start up here, and they come down like this, and they should go here. This is probably the normal but ideal curve. Because if somebody's far from Jesus and it's like you think about the campus preacher, right? The bad campus preacher. They're far from Jesus and telling them how they need to change everything in their life and how they're evil people. You get that high challenge over here with no invitation, right? You start down here. That doesn't work. The way people are wooed into the gospel, because the gospel, remember, is good news, not bad news, is you give them that heavy invitation. You have to enter into relationship. You have to love them like crazy. And then as they get more comfortable and trust you more, quite frankly, they have to trust you, you start pushing in a little bit more challenge. You're going this way on the matrix. Obviously, their coziness factor is going to go down. They're going to feel it. At some point, they're going to feel frustrated, like you've pushed too hard. And when that happens, you have to start pushing into that grace again and that invitation and make sure they're loved, that this isn't an agenda, and continue to give them more invitation. But that's your typical curve, and that's how, honestly, I think we're going to have an effective impact on people, is realizing they need to start here. Eventually, we're into the long game here. Eventually, we continue to give more challenge, and then they finish out in this discipling culture. So, if we're in a group of 2 or 3, I would say, hey, where do you think you are right now in your faith? If you could pick a spot on this matrix, where do you think you're at? And what do you need then? What does that mean? And how would you get up in here, depending on where you're at right now? And you could probably answer that question not just for your faith, but different parts of your life, right? So how are you feeling about your job? How are you feeling about your family life right now? How are you feeling about your schoolwork if you're in school, right? And you can actually figure out what you need in those realms as well. So this is just a tool that we see modeled out this type of life by Jesus, this perfect balance. And this helps us get a baseline to say, what do we need in our faith to grow? But then as we think about leading people, How do we lead people so effectively that they're going to land up here eventually? And this gives us a tool to do it. If you see somebody tanking that you're mentoring and they're getting super frustrated, you got to back off on the challenge. You just have to. Jesus will do his thing when he wants to do his thing. You have to back off and raise the level of invitation in that season. If you've been with them for a long time and nothing's changing, but they love you, that's great. They love you, but maybe it's time to put on the heat a little bit and start adding some challenge into that relationship. So, this is what I want you guys to do. For the next 5 to 10 minutes, I want you guys to talk at your tables about what stuck out to you, and particularly, where do you think you land right now on this matrix? I would do that in a huddle. We would talk about it a while, and then eventually I would get to those questions again. So what do you think God is saying to you? What are you going to do about it? And we would check back in the next week. And I want to encourage you, we're going to practice this out. I'm going to lead a bunch of you over the next several months in these huddles. We want to, as best we can, not tell people what God is saying to them, not tell people what they should do. We want the Holy Spirit to tell them, and we want to ask people questions that gets them to that answer. What is God saying to me? What am I going to do about it? Don't tell them what they should do. All right? All right. So you guys can land anywhere, talk about this, talk about where you're at, maybe even share what you think God is saying to you, what you're going to do about it. And that we'll talk about probably 10 minutes here and then jump into the next phase. All right. Go ahead, guys. All right. We're going to jump ahead here. Sean Hopwood is going to share his story. We're doing this for a couple reasons each week because I really want you guys to get to know each other. It's a great way to do it. But secondly is I really want us to hear real stories of transformation in people's life. And it doesn't matter the scale. What we want to understand is God does and will change people's lives, and we want to celebrate that, and we want to use that really as a hope and a goal and a dream for the people that we're around and hopefully will connect with through this church. So, Sean, you have the mic for that? Sean? Oh, he's got it. Sean, come on up.
Good morning, everybody. When Mitch first asked me about this, sharing my testimony, it really made me reflect on why. Why do we do this? What is it about our testimony as Christians that we share? And we have a special privilege within us to be God's redemption song. I did some looking up in the book of Isaiah, and in the most basic form, I saw that we were created for God's glory. And so when we share our testimony, we're sharing what God has done and how he's transformed us. And each of us have a unique and individual story, and this will change lives. I know that through my experience of not becoming a Christian for a long time in my life, it's been these testimonies that have shaped and changed me. In the book of Revelation, it actually says that the saints have overcome the devil by the power of their testimony. So when you get discouraged, you can think about back to your life, man, look where God has fought for me. Or when there's not very much progress in your life, look how far he's brought me. So I think it just encouraged you, we should all embrace our own testimony because that's life-changing. My own story, it starts with a feeling. You could call it a malaise or a discontent. Maybe some of you can relate to it, but you're at your job and you're not completely unhappy, but isn't there more? Isn't there something else? Maybe in your living situation, you're comfortable where you live at, you're working your 9-to-5 job, but isn't there something else? Isn't there something more? Growing up, I knew there had to be something more. When I heard Jesus Christ, I thought it was a swear word. I didn't know that he was a person. I didn't know that he was God. My experience for church is, I don't know if you've heard the term of Creaster, but we went to church on Christmas and Easter. So growing up, my parents, I'm fully convinced they did the best they could for me. But they had a lot of their own affairs they were struggling with, in and out of divorces, in and out of marriages. We kind of got pushed to the side a little bit, and it was emotionally empty for us. So as we're growing up, I always knew I had this empty kind of void. Isn't there more? Isn't there something more than this? And so as I'm growing up, me and my brother kind of got pushed to the side, and we're just feeling more and more like we don't belong. Like there's got to be a different place for us. My brother eventually tries to commit suicide because of how bad our family life gets at home. CPS is often called on. The police are a formal thing at our house. And so our childhood growing up was not really the best. And so as we're growing up, you all know how awkward high school can be anyway. I had a couple medical conditions and mental conditions that pushed me farther and farther off to the side. So as I'm growing up, I just know that there is more in life, but it's not for me. So I sink down into this depression as I'm growing older. And by the time I turn 18, I know that I have to do something, otherwise I'm going to become like my brother. So I joined this program called AmeriCorps. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but we traveled around the country for a year doing community service. We went in after natural disasters and we pulled people out and we rebuilt houses and we did all kinds of work from building parks to working in homeless shelters. And for a while, I had a place that I belonged. For a while, I had a purpose in life. For a while, life meant something to me. But it was only for a year. And so after this program, I went back home and that purpose kind of crumbled. It became, I don't have anything anymore, I don't have a place to belong. And so this started like a very long process of searching for me. I knew that there was more in life and I knew I had to find it. So I called up one of my friends that I met from AmeriCorps and I moved to Seattle. And there's a place in your heart, I believe it's Augustine, that says the heart is restless until it rests in God. And so I'm really restless. I'm looking, I'm searching, I've got to find something. And God is not something you can find by traveling. I thought I could go out into the world and I could find God, and He's not something you can find by traveling because He's already here. And so as I moved to Seattle to be with one of my friends, and I'm still searching, I'm still looking for something. And one day I met this girl online. And it's a great idea to meet somebody online and then just move it in with them within 3 months, isn't it? But thankfully, she's still here today. But so I met this girl online, and one thing I haven't tried, I've traveled around the country, I'm searching for something. One thing I haven't tried is falling in love. And so I moved in with her, and why it worked for a while, if your heart is not built on Jesus Christ, that love is going to fall apart. So as we're growing closer together, I still feel like there's something missing and something empty in my life. And so we were together for a while, and that emptiness started to come back, that void, like there's something missing. And I fell in with a really rough crowd of people. I figured if I couldn't find it in life, if I couldn't find it in love, then maybe I should try and medicate whatever this emptiness is inside of me. So I fell in with a group of people that started drinking really heavy. We started doing heroin, we started doing drugs. And eventually, after a long period of time and a couple brushes with death, I was homeless and I was broke. My relationship had fallen apart, and I was back to the square one of having nothing, still searching, still feeling restless. So I had to move back here to Michigan from Montana because I was broke and homeless, and a Montana winter is rough to be alone in the street. And so I moved back in with my mother, and she invited me to church. Ooh, church. That's one thing I never tried, and that's one thing I did not want to try. I figured if God couldn't keep my parents together, if He couldn't help me overcome this void inside of me, then God was not real, and I did not want to try church. Because eventually, after her nagging, I went to church in just slippers and shorts and like my pajamas. And I would like to say that that was the day that changed everything in my life. And it definitely wasn't. But that was when these gears started turning. These wheels started turning inside of me. Because one thing I haven't tried with God. And so we started growing in the church. I became a lay pastor. And God was not my intent in the church. This church was very legalistic, and so I spent all my time working. And life is not about finding your purpose, it's about finding a person. And the person is Jesus Christ. But I felt like I had to build on this purpose of working through the church. So we became a lay pastor, we started doing offering, I started preaching at churches from Edenville all the way to Three Rivers. And I finally felt like I had found it in life. Like, this is it. But I used God just like I used heroin. It was just another medicator. It was just another something to fill that empty void inside. And I really wasn't looking for a relationship with Christ. I was just looking for something to fill this void. And so I'm working up through the church, and eventually it came to the point where me and the pastor had a lot of problems. We were arguing, we were butting heads. He wanted me to do things I wasn't comfortable with. And so I fell out of the church and my faith crumbled just like that. If it's not founded on Jesus Christ, on the person, then it will crumble just like that. And with it, my marriage crumbled. My faith was gone. My mental illness started really ramping up. I had a severe depression. And I felt like I was just back to square one. Like, isn't there more? Isn't there something else out of this? I've tried God. I've tried traveling. I've tried alcohol. I've tried drugs. There's just got to be more than this. So I did what I always do, which is come up with some kind of scheme to make this go away. One day we were at our friend's house, and we saw a documentary on the Appalachian Trail, 2,200 miles from Georgia to Maine. And I was like, that's it? I can hike this thing off. I can walk out into the woods, and I can figure this out. So me and my wife, we packed up a backpack. We started in Georgia, and we hiked all the way to Maine in 6 months. But like I was saying before, it's not about the place, it's about the person. It's not about the purpose, it's about Jesus Christ. And so as I'm hiking, I'm going over all these things that I've been through in life, my mental illness, my depression, all the stuff that I've been through with drinking and drugs, and I just figure I'm missing something. There has to be something more. And there came a point, and one time when we were hiking, that I was thinking about these things, and I thought, my whole life I've been looking for something to fill this void. It was something. But God is a person. He's not a book. He's not a song. He's not a building. He's a person. And that was the day that I realized if I build my life on the person of Jesus Christ, then my house will never crumble. And so we finished up the trail, and I was playing this over in my mind. Do I want to go back to church? Do I want to build this on Christ? And eventually we came to the bridge, and I knew that this was something I had to try. I had to figure out, is Christ the answer or not? So we came to the bridge, and they started playing the worship music, and for the first time in my life, I lifted my hands knowing I had found it. I had found the answer. It wasn't something, it was someone, and his name was Jesus. And so I felt this call to go back to school. I'm going for leadership and ministry, but I finally have realized that in life, it's not about how empty you feel, it's about how full you can feel in Jesus. Whether we're feeling restless, whether we're feeling like there's something more, the more is Christ. And Paul said he learns to be content wherever he is because he can do all things through Christ who strengthens him. And I finally found this peace that passes all understanding, and that's because I'm not searching anymore. I found the answer. I found Jesus. And so we came to the bridge, I went back to school, and now we're here at this church plant because I feel like this is the most effective, hands-on way to tell people that they don't have to run anymore. They don't have to search. They don't have to look. The answer is already within them, and it's Christ. And so we're here at this church plant to work with Mitch, and that is my story.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, thanks, Sean. That's awesome. And I love hearing those stories of transformation. This is what it's all about, right? This is why we do what we do, not for ourselves, but for other people to experience what we get to experience. And so with that said, I'm actually going to change something we were going to do together and make that homework. Hope you guys don't mind. So we do have time to pray. If we're going to sacrifice one, that's the homework piece is the one I want to sacrifice. So one of the things that I'm going to have you do is, so this book right here, Fresh Expressions, it's a great book. It's only took me an hour and a half to read, which is even better. But it gets at this idea that I'm going to try to summarize for you real quick. I don't know where that marker went now. This idea that so long the church would just set up over here. Can you guys see this? And we would wait for people to come to us, right? We would wait till they come to us. And then somewhere in our history, we're like, oh, wow, that doesn't really work very good because it's not easy to get to us. There's a bunch of barriers that make it hard for people to get to us. So we're gonna build a bridge so they can get over that barrier and they can get to us a little bit easier. And that could be a lot of things. That's ministries. That could be a cool worship service. It could be a lot of different things, which is good. That's helpful. And then they're thinking, well, that's still not working. Not many people are coming. And so let's go over and get them and then bring them back. That's kind of what we're talking about, what we're doing. That's good as well. But this book takes it one step further and says, what if we use that bridge to get across to them and camp out right here where they're at? And that's where we build our church. And that's what these hangouts are all about, is creating spaces where they live, where they do life, and we go into their space and do life with them, figure out what makes them tick, figure out where the gospel meets their needs, their life, and speak into that, and we set up church there. That's the hope of this. That's what the hangouts are all about, is setting that up, setting up those spaces where we can go do life with them. Now, hopefully they do. We're going to have church services, so hopefully they do join us eventually. But what if our church ends up being right here? There's churches right now being set up all over where they're setting them up in biker bars. They're setting them up in truck stops and going where people are at. And I do wonder if maybe this is how we church plant, as you find your space, your niche, and you set up a church right there. So anyways, that's a little bit about this book. But with that said, that's why we do these hangouts. And what I want you guys to do when you're gone is we're going to have these questions. I'm going to email them to you. This is going to be your homework. I want you to think through these first 3 questions. What things do you like to do? What things are already in your schedule? What are easy activities to invite groups into? And then to actually pick at least one event that you're going to plan, you're going to host, you're going to lead, whatever that means, in the next few months. And so Rick already has one going for us, and he's going to open up a block of tickets. He works for the K-Wings, to go to the K-Wings, and you'll be able to purchase those. Right, there'll be a link, so we'll get that out. This is great because we're going out just hopefully together and having fun, getting to know each other. But this is a great opportunity because you could buy an extra ticket or two, and nobody turns down free tickets. If you just happen to have a free ticket or two and say, hey, I've got these free tickets, you should come with me, they'll say, okay, that sounds good. And so this is a great opportunity, again, just to invite people into the world of things we're already doing and find ways. So thinking through that. So that's going to be your homework, and I'm actually going to invite you to let me know what it is you're going to do. And I have to give you, Kim and I are working on, I mentioned it, but a way to help subsidize these things. We don't want to feel like it's a huge financial burden and therefore you won't do it. I encourage these things like the hockey deal or like our going out to Hopcat, because people, when they go out to eat, they expect to pay, right? So those work. But if you're hosting something, and we don't want to deter that possibility, we want to help support that as much as we can. So that'll be your homework. The other piece of your homework is, we already talked about this a little bit, but I want you to find one person in this room that you're going to grab lunch or coffee or and maybe they're not in this room, some people are gone. Somebody on this team, you got the contact info, find somebody you don't know, hopefully very well, and go connect with them this week. Maybe have them over, find something you want to do. Maybe if you have kids, you can let them play and you guys get together, whatever. I want that to be done. It's really important that we get to know each other well. If we're gonna function like a family on mission, we have to be a family first. And so it's going to be really important that we get to know each other. So that's one way you can do that. And so we have that. We have this brainstorming thing for the hangout. And I want you guys to be praying this week. I want you guys to be praying. I mentioned it last week, this rhythm, developing a rhythm of life plan. What are you going to do? I want you to start praying into that and say, God, what would this rhythm look like? How am I going to make sure I'm regularly engaging in worship for you? And so another shape that we're going to talk about later, triangle. This is where that book, 3D movement, 3D comes from this, up, in, out. and they'll explain it if you want to read ahead. I think it's the first shape. Our faith should be three-dimensional. Should be a big up element, worship, and in with other Christians, and out with the people outside of the church. And that homework has all three of those in there. And so I'm going to try to do that each week. All right, so I'll send that out in a short email, hopefully. And then, so you guys will know what to do. But I want to spend the next 8 minutes, you guys praying at your table for this church plant, for friends, for maybe things going on right now in your lives, maybe there's some illness or some things going on, and just be there praying for each other. And that will be it. And then you guys can go grab your kids if you have them. There's over at the resource table, give. If you give in person, there's a basket over there. And then we also need help moving the black curtains to the edges of the room at some point. If you need to go, go. Otherwise, you can stick around and help us. We're going to leave the tables and chairs this week. So without I think that's it. So go ahead and pray, and we will see you next week.